Rick seems to be the absolutely ideal person to come and give the talk tonight. So if I just say a few words about Nick's background then. He served for many years as the Secretary and County Recorder for the Surrey Amphibian and Reptile Group, where he leads recording and conservation work for the county's frogs, toads and newts. He's also a published author on wildlife, including Amphibians and Reptiles of Surrey, and holds a license to work with endangered species, reflecting his recognised expertise in their protection and management. And I think, Rick, you're talking for about 45 minutes and then time for questions.
That's it, man.
Up to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What a welcome. I think the reason I was first in that list when you were looking up amphibian specialists may be that my surname begins with A, so that's probably why I was first in the list. I am indeed the Secretary of SARG, Surrey Amphibian and Reptile Group. We claim to be one of the oldest county groups in the country. Most counties do have a group now, which is a terrific thing to be able to say. And we have a number of functions and roles, some of which I'll touch on tonight. Happy to take questions about all the others as well. In terms of the mechanics of tonight, 45 minutes-ish. There's a recording going on here. If the sound gets too loud, too quiet, just please shout out, raise a hand, whatever. So we are the native species group. We often get confused with pet keeper, reptile keepers, or those people that will come to children's parties and bring a boa constrictor to show the kids and all of that. That's not our bag. We are about the ones that have lived here all along. And these are those amphibian species. We'll talk a bit about the ones that you're most likely to find around here. Here's the reptile species. Again, some of those pretty abundant in the 4Bs area. Our chairman is Steve Langham. He would love to have been here, but he has a job as an MOD logistics and computer expert. So he's very busy at the moment and has been for a while. And as he put it, until Mr. Putin changes his mind, he's going to stay busy. So I've shouldered quite a few things that Steve would have done historically. The committee, however, is a nice active committee spread across the county, which is brilliant. We've got people in Claregate and Evesham, we've got people in Hazelmere, so we've got a good span. And our Facebook follower numbers are in the many hundreds, which is terrific. And the website gets thousands of hits a month, especially at this time of year when everyone is looking up, what do I do with the frog spawn in my pond? So we have got quite a good presence, which we like. This lady, if you were around Surrey Wildlife Trust a couple of decades ago, you will have been unable to have missed Julia. She was one of those people who got things done by the power of her raised eyebrow. And the MBE was thoroughly well deserved. She died. Anything memorable, so of course she has to die on 999, so I can always remember when she finally left us. But she started SARG, and I always like to pay a tribute to her. But as did the nation, because her MBE was for services to nature conservation and well deserved. She started in Bletchingley. It was that pond, the disappearance of that pond, that got her into the conservation of our native amphibians particularly, which was her real love. This was me, this is what got me into it, a holiday in Tunisia. That's me holding a skink. In 1974, in 2009, I was lucky enough to get to Grand Cayman and see the Grand Cayman blue iguana. At the time there were 8 in the world. I knew about it from Blue Peter. Blue Peter had highlighted the problems with the Grand Cayman iguana, and that's what they look like. Won a prize for that photo. I was well chuffed with that. And then most recently, not last year, the year before, I got to Borneo. Again, someone who always wanted to go. And there's a Borneo pit viper, which was very obliging, just sat there while I took literally hundreds of photographs of it. Wonderful. So the activity within the county is about, above all, information. We are the source of data and information. We know where great crested newts are, we know where grass snakes are, we know where smooth snakes are, and we also can deduce where they ought to be and either haven't been found yet or haven't yet got there. And that information is so powerful when it comes to intelligent resistance of planning developments, of sensible mitigation of groundworks, of better planning decisions, of a better level of understanding when it comes to things like motorway verge management and railway line management. If you haven't got the information, you can't make those sorts of decisions convincingly. So data, and then habitats, and of course Surrey, you've all heard that cliche, Surrey, the most wooded county in the country, which is true, and great crested newts are a species of ancient woodlands, so we've got lots of great crested newts as well. Pond management, pond restoration, pond creation, which I think is, if there's one message I would like to focus on tonight for all of you, it's if you can possibly create a pond of any size, anywhere that you have any influence over, whether that's your own garden or a school or where you work, please do. Because essentially garden ponds have become a replacement for countryside ponds, and a supplement in many ways, but there are uncountable numbers of garden ponds now, none of which have any automatic legal protection, none of which are covered by the Freshwater Habitats Directive because they don't count as fresh water, for weird legislative reasons. And not only is it an immediate contribution to that conservation effort, but it's a lot of fun and it's not difficult. And beware of too many books and brochures and training courses trying to explain the science of it or to make it complicated. It's essentially dig a hole in the ground. That's the basic bit, and if you can do that, you're well on the way. We get involved in a lot of management of the small to medium-sized ponds rather than garden ponds. This was one at Jacob's Well, which they did a terrific job of clearing and managing, but they then introduced carp into it, and carp and amphibians do not mix at all. So immediately what could have been a great amphibian pond ceases to be. Here's one much nearer you guys. This is Brocken Pond, which I made a point of visiting just in the week, and it's looking pretty good. It's certainly looking much better than it did in 2005, which is that bottom right-hand photo, when it was just so solid crassula, which is an invasive plant species, that you could virtually walk across it. About 10 years earlier was the clearance you can see in the top right-hand picture. But in 1906, it looked like the black and white photo there. It was something like 10 times bigger than it is now, and regularly was used as a stock pond, which was originally its purpose, and sometimes dried out, as it still does sometimes. Amphibians quite like a bit of drying out, because fish don't, so if it dries out, the fish are put off for a number of years, but the amphibians can return that much faster. There's a bit of a tendency to over-manage. We see this a bit with some of the National Trust ponds, especially if there's dog walkers using them as well. Or if there's stock walking in and out with the hoofs, can really poach the surroundings. So you get this over-managed look. So don't go that far. We'd like a sort of half and half. Again, quite close to here in Newhurst Green, a few years ago now, we had a crisis of great crested newts being run over in great numbers on the roads. That's a criminal offence, because it is a criminal offence to kill or injure a Schedule 5 listed wild animal, and that's what a great crested newt is. Up to £5,000 and or 3 months imprisonment per animal. And with the hundreds that were being killed in Newhurst, that was quite a lot of potential crime. So we moved quickly. We immediately put in some temporary fencing, toad fencing. We organised a band of volunteers who are still doing it, and created pitfall traps, essentially water tanks, small tanks and buckets sunk into the ground. So a newt will come along, walk along the fence, fall in, and then the next one can be safely collected and carried across. We rescued 222 great crested newts just in that one intervention. Since when we've had the curbstones redesigned, because some sewage systems and drainage systems can essentially look like toad traps just by washing animals straight into something they can't climb out of. We've done a lot of work to improve the ponds in the area. Bisley Green, again a lovely pond, but surrounded by what amounts to a lawn. And I think people sometimes forget that the pond is the equivalent really of a nest. If we were talking about bird conservation, the pond is where the eggs are laid, but you've then got to provide all the other habitat needs for that bird. It needs food, it needs shelter, it needs somewhere to do its courtship and its displaying, and it's just the same we need. And all our amphibian species, of course, need somewhere to lay the eggs, but then somewhere to live for most of the year. The great crested newts in my garden pond have already laid and are beginning to think about leaving, and they only turned up just after Christmas. So it's a small proportion of the year that they are water creatures. For the rest of the time they're land creatures, so you have to deliver both to create the effective habitat. This little allotment corner site, which is such a typical Surrey site, got the Betchworth's got one, Brockham's got two. There are allotment patches around, and they're often a really good refuge for reptile species, especially slowworms, and amphibian species, certainly toads, often frogs. And if, like this one, there's a couple of small ponds let into the corners, that will become quite a nice little haven, almost an oasis. Those animals probably won't ever need to leave the area. They'll help the people with the allotments, they will eat plenty of slugs, and they will provide a lot of fun and interest as well. But when people talk about habitat management, landscape management, too often it's this sort of thing. It's like giant gardening. It's prune the trees, clear out the understory, and then cut the grass short, which is of almost no use at all to any amphibian or reptile. Maybe slowworms, and plenty of slowworms in this area, really good slowworm area. Let's, for fun, show of hands who's seen a slowworm. It's most people, yeah. Get a compost heap, they will come to you, especially if you're living in the 4Bs area. And they are quite spectacular, especially little tiny newborn ones which are like bronze. They looks like someone's dropped a brooch, a little metallic thing, and they have live young, so you can find newly emerged young in August, September. Edges, ridges, untidiness, the opposite of a park is what we're really talking about from a herpetological conservation point of view. And this is an aerial view of the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust Place at Barnes. Known to many of you, I'm sure, a great site for birds, especially water birds of all kinds. It's got almost resident bittern, but we used it to relocate some slowworms and grass snakes from a development site where their habitat was going to be destroyed, and they're absolutely thriving. So right in the middle of urban southwest London, we've got reptiles, and also huge numbers of frogs. But these are marsh frogs. These are not native common frogs. There are a few of those as well, but it's mainly marsh frogs. So if you want to show your kids or your grandchildren some frogs, go there in May when there are hundreds of marsh frogs, which are big and loud and unmissable and a lot of fun. So it's absolutely teeming, which of course gives the herons and all the other cormorants and all the other birds plenty to eat as well. Habitat management, it's tragic, and it may, if you're unlucky, it's happened to you when you run the strimmer or a lawnmower over the leg of a frog or through a slowworm. They are not the reptiles or amphibians' best friends, so always walk through it first. Scare stuff away before you mow, and think about whether you really need to mow at all that particular bit. And at a landscape level, we have the same issue. The threshers and the cutters and the mulching machines are pretty bad news for slowworms, which are very slow moving, hence the name. And the number that you can see mulched after this kind of intervention is very sad. We prefer these, which are the side hoes and side cutters. You can create more of a scallop, mosaic, mixed kind of habitat with these. They're less impactful. There's Brockham Pond again. And then that's Healer's Pond and Merstham Pond, which is now part of that Surrey Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve. Getting in there in waders with bill hooks and rakes and shovels is kind of the best way to do it in many ways. There are machines out there that will do it, but humans doing it has less impact probably on the animals than the other habitat. People say to us when to do it. If you read old books, they'll say do it in September or October because the amphibians will have left the pond and will be living on land and won't be in the water. No one's told the amphibians that. If you go to your pond at any time, probably you will find some amphibians. But remember, these are frontier species. They evolve to deal with a changing, shifting pattern of world. A pond is an ephemeral thing. No pond stays. Ponds are always in a state of either getting bigger or more likely getting filled in and eventually becoming land. So any creature that can cope with that, of course, can cope with a bit of disruption. So don't worry about clearing out. If you've got an existing pond, don't use the amphibians as an excuse not to clear it out if it needs it. Start the work. Most of them will get out the way. You will find a few. You might need to put those in a bucket while you're doing the work. But do the clearance, and if you have got a choice, go with September, October, November probably. This pond is behind the nurses' quarters of East Surrey Hospital over at Red Hill, which many people know. And tucked away behind there is this pond which was covered in duckweed. You can see it absolutely dense with duckweed. So we invented a floating barrage and pulled it across. It worked remarkably well, I must say. It was a good way of clearing it. There it is in action. And we do that every so often now, and indeed they do it themselves as part of their conservation volunteering. And it just keeps the water surface clear enough that light can get in and that there can be oxygen exchange, which is important for the subaquatic plants. Of course, the duckweed doesn't care, but what's underneath does. That's what it looks like. It was last summer. So this week, knowing I was coming here, I went to one of my favourite ponds in Brockham for spawn, and I think I've got the name of the road right. It's if you turn in at the little shop on Strood Green, is that one we know, the volunteer run, the community shop. Drive down there as far as you go to get to a dead end which stops actually at the recreation ground, and then walk across that wreck. And there's a pond in the corner which fails any objective assessment as a habitat site for frogs. It's under a tree, it's dark, it's constantly interrupted by children and people and playing and dog walkers and all of that. It's right in the centre of an urban space. And yet the frogs, I did a quick clump count. Each clump of spawn is a female having laid her entire clump for the year. 1,500 eggs maybe. And so if you count the clumps, you've got a pretty good idea of how many females there. There was 24, so that's 24 female frogs. There's probably twice as many males, so that's probably a population of 60 frogs that have found their way to the middle of a recreation ground essentially. The odds on that spawn, I'm not optimistic, and frankly, if someone thought I might rescue it to that spawn and put it in a tank on my sideboard, I think that would be probably doing the frogs a favour, especially if you put the tadpoles or the frogs back into that pond, or even a nearby but better one. But alongside those 20 odd clumps of spawn was this, because at the other end of the pond someone thought, oh, where will I put all that garden clippings of whatever plants that was, and the fertiliser bags that I've used? Oh, I know, I'll bother to walk right across the recreation ground and chuck them into the pond. And it's mind-boggling. Again, frogs don't care particularly, but I don't know what else has been on the roots of those plants, if there's herbicides or something on them. It just seems an awful shame. In fact, you'd bother to walk all the way to the pond instead of walking to the car. Beyond me. This is Brookham Common Pond. There are interlinked ponds, a whole chain of ponds on Brookham Common, which were created by the monks for fish, to keep fish in, to eat. So they're all staged with little waterfalls between them. And This shows that if you take the fish out, the fish were removed by, it used to be a big fishing site run by an angling club, and it now isn't. National Trust have said no, it's too important a site for great crested newts and for dragonflies, so no more fishing. You can come and collect the fish, which the angling club did, and then electro-fish, which stuns the fish, and you can take them out before they recover. So there are now no fish on Bookham Common, and coincidentally, that pond has dried out completely for each of the last 3 summers. So even if there had been any fish, there now wouldn't be. As a result of which, the dragonfly population has soared, and the toad population is huge, and the great crested newt population is doing very well as well. So it does show that if you get the fish out, either at pond level or at habitat level, you very quickly see a massive resurgence in amphibian numbers. This is Newdigate, not a long way from here. A site that used to be run growing and selling frogs for dissection in school biology O-level exams and other pet type trades. It was called Beambrook Nurseries. On our website we've got a scanned copy of their catalogue from 1910, and it's a fascinating read, the things you can buy, and the absolute lack of any suggestion of environmental impact or consequence. If you want to buy it, we'll sell you it. It doesn't matter where in the world it came from, come and buy it. As part of that, they dug lots of smallish ponds, about 6 foot by 10 and about 3 or 4 feet deep, stock ponds, which are all kind of still there. The site belongs to Bill Keir, who many of you will know, the land groundwork contractor guy, and it is teeming with the consequences of all those different alien species that were brought and kept there. So it's probably, we don't know this for sure, but it's a pretty sound guess that it's the source of the alpine newts, which you find in Newdigate, Dorking, Holmwood, those areas. They've moved out from Newdigate. It's also probably the source of some Italian great crested newts, which are a subspecies of great crested newt, and some diced snakes, which are a species of grass snake, which is more stripy than the native snake, but which hybridizes cheerfully with the native one. So we have some curiously stripy grass snakes in Newdigate, but also a terrific population of all the common amphibians which have taken advantage of the ponds there. Julia Witchley, of whom I spoke in the 1990s, did a survey of Tandridge district, a historical number of ponds versus current number of ponds, and the size of the dots tells you how many ponds there are in that particular square. And this absolutely brought home the massive reduction in numbers in ponds, the drop over time. And the garden ponds and other pond creation activities provide a chance to really not revert, well, hopefully reverse, but certainly slow down that pond loss. This is a pond we created in Merstham. There's a company there that sells refurbished red telephone boxes. Yes. That's the one you see off the train, that's them exactly, yes. It's different. And now telephone boxes of the world, they have diversified. If you want a French telephone box or a Russian telephone box, they will sell you that as well. And they did very well out of the idea that village greens really should have a phone box on them, and that you can then put a defib machine inside it so it becomes, or indeed a short-term lending library, all the various things that people do. And quite a lot of people seem to think their garden needs a red phone box in it as well. They said, we've got this car park, it's too big, even if we were all at work, it would never be full. We know there are great crested newts in the area, which there are, most of them's a good site for them. We'd like a pond, and we'll pay for the materials if you guys do the volunteering, and we know a guy with a digger who'll dig the hole. Too good an offer to miss. So that's not quite the best sequence. That's the digger, right, so there's the digger digging. clearing and making that, which was the hole. We deliberately went for the edge so that we were next to the habitat, the woodlands, which is obviously, as we were saying earlier, just as important, arguably more important perhaps than the pond. And then the ground protecting layer, that's the white one, then the black butyl liner which goes on top. Butyl's terrific, it's horribly expensive, but it's absolutely brilliant. And if you're contemplating a pond and money is no object, don't buy the polythene, which will eventually disappoint you after 5 or 6 or 7 years when it starts to leak. Buy the butyl, which will delight you for 30 or 35 years if you're lucky. So it really is much, much, much longer lasting. Smells amazing as well. Then liners, logs around the edge, and I think we've got a shot or two of it all going in, and some very unflattering posture, people trying to push it smooth. Then water going in helps it fill the nooks and crannies. Then you can put your edging around. And at this stage, I mean, you think, who'd want that in their garden? Okay, it's not exactly pretty. But buy in some plants, buy in some turf for the edging, get volunteers like Kevin, who for a day job leads trips around the world, like spotting polar bears and things in the Arctic, and for relaxation then comes and does this kind of stuff. And that's what it looked like within a weekend. So if you get, it wasn't a huge number, 10 people, and within a year it looked like that. And I would challenge anyone to walking past that pond be able to say whether it had been there for a year or 2 years or 5 years. No, it's already, it looks like that. And they did a leaf search and they found great crested newt eggs hidden in the leaves. So already the newts have found it. Another thing we do is the toad crossing coordination for the county, which is ever so topical because they're all fully active at the moment. And indeed, some of the toads are on the way back, like the newts. This was one of the original Surrey sites for big toad crossings. This was the Drift in Horsley. And although we call them toad crossings, very often they are frog, common newt and great crested newt crossings. So what you're really saving is often a much, toads are not common anymore, but they're around in the tens of thousands. Great crested newts are much more localised, and anything you do to help toads across the road is almost definitely going to help newts across the road. The Drift was a very difficult, dangerous place to run a traditional toad crossing where you collect the toads on one side of the road, put them in a bucket, carry them over the road, tip them out. And we got much more positive response than we perhaps expected from Surrey Highways when we wanted to pinch the idea that the Dutch have had for a while of put a tunnel under the road for amphibians rather than have human beings risking their own lives carrying them across. And of course it's all year round and permanent and more efficient. And so this was the one, this was the first toad tunnel, certainly in Surrey, possibly in Britain, not sure. And you wouldn't, it's still there, you wouldn't know it. You know, if you drove along the Drift, it wouldn't cross your mind that you've just driven over a pioneering piece of highways infrastructure, but you have. And of course the first question then is, did it work? After spending many thousands of pounds putting it in, does it work? So here's Daniel with a car battery and what all these years ago was newfangled camera technology. That's the camera that he set up in the mouth of the tunnel and got it running. And there is a frog obligingly coming through. Should we do that again? Come on, frog, there it goes. So we knew something was using it, but it was a frog, not a toad. But then there's the toad. Within a week of it being opened at the ends and we chucked a bit of leaf mould in, the animals started using it. And That frog seems to really like it, just kind of sat there. Camera traps back then were really very slow and very inefficient and very black and white, and we've got plans afoot to put much more modern ones in. And one thing that camera caught, which was fascinating, was a stoat coming through that tunnel, which, of all the things you might think wouldn't need to, can run across the road, right? But no, it was using a tunnel, but I suspect it was also thinking, I wonder if there's any food in that tunnel, but it whizzed through. So that was the pioneering one. When the Junction 10 M25 A3 junction works were being first proposed, Britain's most dangerous motorway junction, we were part of the consultation process because that is a site for sand lizards and great crested newts and all kinds of other things. So it's an triple SI, a site of special scientific interest for lots of reasons, nightjar and all kinds of things, but partly for pathological reasons. And there had been a toad crossing on Old Lane, which is the road that ends at Ockham Bights and joins the main road if you're driving from the Effingham end. A toad crossing which was a successful toad crossing run by volunteers. And so we knew the toads were there, and we knew that a lot of toads crossed into what I think is called Boulder Mere is its official name, but what I still call Ockham Pond, but the one right next to the main road, opposite what used to be the Hut Hotel. And so as part of the massive that's not quite true, multi-million pound roadworks, two things have gone in. One is probably Britain, again certainly Surrey, possibly Britain's first heathland bridge. So it's a bridge slightly wider than this hall and about 5 times longer, with a footpath, and then all the rest of it is heathland, made with turfs cut from the heath and then sown in a foot of sand on top of the bridge. And I was there yesterday, and it's extraordinary. Your brain completely forgets that you are standing on top of a motorway with 8 lanes going underneath. It's so authentic looking. Well, you can hear the traffic, of course you can, but there's lots of places in Surrey you can hear the traffic, but you absolutely forget that you are in the air walking over a road. And the hope is that the sand lizards will forget that as well. And so we will, for the first time in a long time, have Ockham Common sand lizards able to get to Wisley Common on the other side, under their own steam, and hopefully get a bit more genetic diversity and a bit more interbreeding and just a bigger habitat. So that was one spin-off from that. And the other was, we'd like toad tunnels, please. Note the plural. So we put in for 3, and to our surprise, they said, yeah, 3. So again, this is yesterday, temporary fencing to funnel the animals towards the tunnel mouths. This was the tunnel, and it was one of the tunnels being built. That's what it looks like from one end. That's it, finished more or less using... the Americans have got into this in a big way, so there's a firm called ACO, ACO, who have been enormously helpful and supportive. This is their biggest installation in Britain, possibly in Europe. So they're really keen to see it working. So the materials, the components are all standard ACO component, including the concrete tunnel, the very durable plastic covers and fencing. And this is a toad's eye view that I took by hanging my iPhone into the hole. And this is where I'm very much hoping to get a trail cam fairly soon to see what's going through there. At the moment, it's essentially sand and bare concrete, so that may be a little bit off-putting, but I think when the leaves come dropping through the slots in the top, it'll become more appealing. And then this semi-permanent, essentially permanent until the car drives over it, I suspect, amphibian fencing, which is curved like that, which means they can get over it that way, but they can't get over it that way. It's just quite a neat design, and of course funnels them towards the tunnels, of which there are 3. And if you drive along Old Lane, which is now fully open again, again, you won't, unless you're looking for them, you won't know they're there. You'll just think you've driven over a kind of rumble strip or something, but you have driven over one of 3 brand new toad crossings. Let's talk a bit about what you might find and the context of amphibians. Of course, amphibian, land and water, that's what it means. This is the golden frog, beautiful and extinct. Extinct in my lifetime, extinct in my kids' lifetime, actually, thinking about it. So a total tragedy, extraordinary, beautiful things. There's a film of David Attenborough looking at them, marvelling at them, and they are no more. And that's true for a worryingly large number of amphibians. They are vulnerable to atmospheric pollution, they're vulnerable to land pollution, they're vulnerable to water pollution, because they live in all of these habitats at different times, of course. And extraordinary and colourful and diverse though they are harshly, cruelly, a very good bio-indicator, because if your amphibians are dying, then something in your environment is going wrong. You won't tell you whether it's water, air or land, but you know that something is. So that mixture of land, water, and the fact that they have semi-permeable membrane for skin, which we do a little bit. We haven't entirely evolved that way, but theirs is much more so, such that they can breathe through it, they can transfer by osmosis through it, but of course that means that any contaminant, any pollution, anything unpleasant can get in as well. Their skin is less of a barrier than ours. And so, because they do have this absorbent skin, any toxins in the environment will actually just stay within the frog. Will do this biomagnification effect. We often get frog and toad calls mistaken. I think people kind of assume it's a frog if it's in their garden, but very often it's a toad. I suspect everybody in this room could tell the difference, especially if you have one of each in front of you. But the basic structure is different. If it's a walking along kind of animal that can sometimes jump, like human beings, I guess, it's a toad. If it basically jumps, like a kangaroo, it's a frog. So the moment you see it move, it'll make it very obvious whether this is something it's perfectly happy doing, or whether it's only doing it to get away from you and it can't wait to get back to walking. The skin is very often an indication, although dried out frogs can look a bit toad-like perhaps. But the sticky up eyes and the parotid glands behind a toad's eye, those which is where the skin venom is generated and kept, which then oozes out over their skins, which makes cats not like eating them, most things not like eating them. Again, frogs don't have that. Frogs just jump out the way. You'll all have seen spawn. There's loads at the moment. Looks like quite a good spawn year, I suspect, though you always worry about the late frosts coming in March or early April even, to just do for the spawn just when it's about to emerge. Nice picture of the tadpole showing how colourful they are actually, quite multicoloured, especially as they get bigger. We get every so often panicked calls from people who've got albino tadpoles, which can look very strange but are completely natural as an occurrence. They don't particularly survive because they are so visible to predators, but they're often, as the ones here, kind of translucent and quite alien looking, but it's a normal part of the stage. And they produce albino frogs. So here's some 2-year-old albino common frogs. This is a great picture of the way frogs eat. I think people don't realise that their tongues have this massive hinge that swings out and catches stuff, because it happens so fast that unless you've got a super speed camera which took this picture, you simply don't see it. The mealworm's there, then it's not, and the frog's doing that. And it's so quick, it's one of nature's fastest reactions. They also hunt this way by jumping out of the water, which again gives you some, if you're lucky, a chance of a very dramatic photo. Now this is not a common frog, this is one of 3 species of frog which are relatively common around here. And these are the water frogs, so-called. They came originally from Romney Marsh in big numbers and have worked around from Kent. They turned up in quite a lot of garden centres because the spawn and the tadpoles were often sold by garden centres. The tadpoles are quite dramatically big as well, so sometimes they would simply sell the tadpoles as pet giant tadpoles. So there's a big population on Epsom Downs, Tattenham Corner, which definitely didn't come from Kent, but must have come from a garden centre somewhere there. There's an enormous population in Newdigate, which I suspect is from the Beanbrook nursery source I spoke of earlier. But it's an interesting group of animals. I'll play you their song in a minute because that's quite dramatic. At this time of year you'll see common frogs in amplexus hugging each other whilst they spawn. Common toads likewise do that, and again you'll see sometimes a sort of toad ball as they're all clustering together. A lot of colour variation with toads. This illustrates that rather well. These are both completely common toads. One is essentially yellow and one's essentially red, but that's not that unusual. Common toad eating. If you see a toad stretching its legs out, trying to make itself look really high and tall and scary, it's just been frightened by something. And they do this sometimes with cats. If cats are walking near them, you might see that. They very often do it with any kind of reptile predator. And here's one next to a grass snake. They sometimes, I've only heard it once, make a really weird squeaky high-pitched noise, a bit like a really cheap whistle out of a party bag. It's a very strange sound. I've only heard it once. Well, there's a toad ball, which is again what's going on at the moment. And you'd be lucky to find it because it's deep in the ponds. It's not like frog spawn, which is unmissable on the surface or right at the edge of a pond, and usually the hottest, warmest bit of the pond. Toad spawn, very different, laid in a string and deliberately threaded amongst leaves and roots and things low down, in that very neat line of double eggs, but often 4, 5, even 6 feet deep in the water. So it's cooler down there. It's a bit risky from that point of view, but it's safer from predation, so you can see why they would do that. We won't see an Atterjack toad around here, but we do have them in Surrey. Surrey is one of the only 4 counties that's got all the native species of reptile and all the native species of amphibian, which is pretty brilliant. But there's only a handful of Atterjack toad at the moment, out towards French and Common. These, plenty around here. Great crested newt, it's a male doing his breeding condition thing. If you see a newt with stripy toes, it's a great crested newt. Even if it's a bit short and small and not one you would necessarily call great, it's got stripy toes, like a tiger, it's a great crested newt. That's absolutely the way. But generally speaking, we get a lot of calls from people who've seen a newt in their pond with an orange stomach and dark blobs and a crest. And not unreasonably they think they've seen a great crested newt because they've never seen a great crested newt. But we're talking about the difference in size between a coot and a black swan. You know, so you could see a coot and think you'd seen a black swan because it's a black bird swimming on the surface, but you haven't. You know, until you've seen the big one, you don't get the contrast. So there's a male common newt in the bottom of this picture. And yeah, nice orange flash and a crest on the tail, definitely, and the female above, but very different to that. And the difference between 7 or 8 inches for a great crested newt, 3 or 4 inches at most for a common newt. We do occasionally get palmate newts in Surrey on the heathland. They like acid conditions, and there's some acid ponds on the heaths. And you do get both in some ponds. They don't seem to be quite so fussy. Palmate, because of that big weird palm, almost like a duck webbing on the back legs of the male. That's their equivalent of the crest. That's their breeding season look. Newt larvae, which again you can find in a lot of ponds through the summer, and which are eaten by just about everything. Common frog, just as a reminder, smooth skins, athletic, jumping about if you're trying to catch them, and almost always have what we've pointed to here, that dark patch, the tympanum, behind the eye. But they come in so many different colours. These are all common frogs, and you know, people will ring us and say, I've got a red frog, I've got a yellow frog, I've got a spotted frog. Yeah, you have. that's all we can say. Common toad, much more warty kind of skin, generally stockier, might jump once to get away from you, but will then revert to walking. If you get close enough, the eyes are very different as well. And the toad eyes have a gold iridescence, There's old stories of toads had a jewel in their skull, which is what shines through the eyes, and if you get them in the right light, they are quite shiny. There's some close-up toad spawn, and there's a frog tadpole next to a toad tadpole. Again, it's one of those things, if you had them both in your hand, you could tell the difference, but if you're only looking at one, it's quite difficult. But frog tadpoles sort of speckly, almost metallic speckles sometimes, and toad tadpoles really jet, light-absorbing black. Both will sometimes swim in swarms. Saw this last year actually in the River Mole at Leatherhead, under Leatherhead Bridge, which was a bit weird. But yeah, a great cloud of tadpoles all swimming together. People saying, "Look, there's a fish." No, it's not a fish. What is it? I can't work it out. And it was difficult to work out what it was, but it was an entire raft of tadpoles swimming as one. But if you see it, it's almost always toads that have done that big shoulder, because they are so black. It does make quite a dark shadow. And here's the newts. Newts are out laying eggs at the moment, and you might see them, if you're lucky, spot one. They use their back legs to wrap the leaf around each separate egg, so you can see them doing the equivalent of that. And afterwards, if you unfold the leaf very gently, you'll see the. So just a little more to close about us as an organisation, a little bit of mentioning what we do. All of this would apply to your own ponds, but common sense like water edge safety, being alert to the disease risks. If you're going to use tools in the water, then clean those, sterilise them before you put them in another pond, if you're moving between ponds. And particularly tow crossings, the most dangerous bit is the cars. That's, there's no doubt at all. And even though our tow crossings are well signed with permanent and temporary signage, and all of our folk are wearing high vis, people still whiz past at 40, 50 miles an hour, and it is genuinely dangerous. If you'd like to join us, please do. If you Google Surrey ARG or SARG, you'll find us easily, I'm sure. And I've brought some cards as well. Feel free to take away a business card with our gen on it. £6 a year, and that gives you then access to all of our data sheets on all of the species, the records of where they are, a lot of quizzes, photo quiz, which one's this and how quickly can you answer it, and all that sort of ID practice. And a lot of interesting ancient documents. I mentioned the Beanbrook catalogue, but we've got some amphibian and reptile books scanned going back to the 1870s in there as well. So it's a nice place for a wander. And we're closely linked with the Wildlife Trust, of course, and the two national groups, ARC and Frog Life, and then the county groups, of which obviously we're one, have their own ARG UK umbrella, which provides our backup as well, and the British Trust for Conservation and Volunteers. Again, you might recognise this is the Surrey Wildlife Trust Atlas series. Pretty much every taxa has got one now. There's one on ladybirds, there's one on ants, there's two on butterflies, but there's also one on amphibians and reptiles, which is that one. Not in print at this moment, but gettable quite easily second-hand. And don't pay the 187 quid that somebody was asking for one the other day. You should be able to pick it up for about a tenner, probably. But it's getting a bit older now. 2001 it came out, so the information about what's where is perhaps a bit out of date, but the species information, the photos and all that are still absolutely current, so that's a good place to go. And I've got a few other wildlife gardening guides and things. Feel free to have a look, and then all of those are downloadable from the sites. And the final thing I'll plug is that not Surrey, but Sussex Wildlife Trust, starting in 10 days' time, I think, but it's free to register, are doing an online 10-day, 1 hour a day gardening for wildlife course, which covers a lot on ponds as well as other aspects of wildlife gardening, so I thought that might be a bit of fun. Okay.